Millbrook was one of those small American towns where life flowed steadily, like water in a quiet stream. Narrow streets lined with old maple trees dozed in the shade of their crowns, while neat houses with well-kept lawns created an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility. Here, time seemed to slow its pace. Neighbors still greeted each other over fences. Elderly people gathered on benches near their houses, and children played carefree on the sidewalks until dusk. But it was in this quiet, almost sleepy town, where everyone knew their neighbor by face and gossip spread faster than autumn leaves, that strange things began to happen. In the twilight, when daylight gave way to evening shadows, the ghost of old Tom Baker appeared on the quiet streets. In life, Tom was a slender man of short stature, with a neatly trimmed gray beard. Calm and principled, he had a reputation for being stubborn but kind-hearted. His passion was roses, to which he devoted all his free time, and Sunday chess matches with his best friend became an integral part of his measured life. Now, a year after his death, the townspeople began to notice a familiar figure wandering the evening streets. Tom's ghostly figure, just as slender and upright as in life, appeared in familiar places. But what drew the most attention was the envelope that the ghost firmly clutched in his transparent hands. It seemed that even after death, some unfinished business prevented old Tom from finding peace. Among those who encountered the ghost was Mrs. Peterson, a plump woman of 68 who always looked impeccable in her favorite pearl necklace. She was known as the tireless collector of local news, a chatty and caring soul of the town, though somewhat fussy. She was returning from the store, mentally preparing for her usual evening walk and sorting through the latest gossip she could discuss with her neighbors. Seeing a familiar figure, she greeted him out of habit. "Good evening, Tom. How are your roses this year?" Tom merely nodded in response, clutching the envelope tightly in his thin fingers, and silently walked past. Only at home, while unpacking groceries on the kitchen table, did Mrs. Peterson suddenly freeze, realizing the terrible truth. Tom had died a year ago. That night, she couldn't sleep for a long time. Mrs. Peterson kept replaying her encounter with Tom in her head. She was absolutely certain it was him. The same gait, the same posture, even the same gesture when he nodded in response. But it was impossible. She had been at his funeral, laid flowers on his grave, and for a whole year had walked past his empty house with its ever-present roses in the front garden. "Maybe I'm just tired," she whispered to herself, tossing and turning. "Maybe it was just someone who looked like him, and my imagination played a cruel trick." But that envelope in his hands, she definitely saw the envelope, and this encounter felt too real to be a mere figment of imagination. Something told her that this wasn't just a delusion of a tired mind. Tom had returned with a purpose, and that envelope held special significance. She was too level-headed a person to believe in ghosts, but also too honest to deny what she had seen with her own eyes. The next day after that strange encounter, Mrs. Peterson couldn't find peace. She spent the entire evening by the window, peering through the lace curtains onto the street. Indeed, when twilight enveloped Millbrook, she saw the familiar figure. Tom was walking his usual route again, and the envelope, as before, was firmly clutched in his transparent hands. Having confirmed that this wasn't a one-time apparition or a figment of her imagination, Mrs. Peterson decided to take action. The following evening, she tracked the ghost. Despite her fear, curiosity, and a sense of some unfinished business compelled her to go out at the same time. Tom appeared, as expected, on his usual route. His ghostly figure moved along familiar streets, past the park bench where he once held Sunday chess matches with George, past the old cafe where they traditionally had coffee after their games. Mrs. Peterson, keeping her distance, noticed how the ghost would always stop near George's house, as if hesitating, but never dared to come closer. With each step following the ghost, her initial fear gave way to deep sympathy. Watching Tom pause near his old friend's house, she began putting everything together. A year ago, just before Tom's death, the town was buzzing with gossip about a quarrel between the two inseparable friends. She had noticed herself how their Sunday chess matches had ceased, how Tom had started spending more time alone tending to his roses, how George no longer came by for their traditional coffee. The ghost looked exactly as she remembered Tom in life. The same neatly trimmed gray beard, the same slender shoulders and upright posture. But something had subtly changed. In his eyes, once so alive and attentive, that special sparkle that always warmed his conversation partners had faded. Now they showed only endless longing and regret. One evening, absently adjusting her favorite pearl necklace, she gathered all her courage. Approaching the ghost, Mrs. Peterson quietly said, "Tom, I know who you want to give this letter to. I can help." Her voice trembled, but the determination in it was unshakable. Tom didn't respond. He just looked at her with his faded eyes, in which now appeared a faint glimmer of hope. The evening in Millbrook was cool and quiet. The streets, already wrapped in soft twilight, seemed especially peaceful. The streetlights cast gentle light on the sidewalks, and the air carried a faint aroma of spring flowers from well-tended front gardens. They walked together. Mrs. Peterson tried to speak casually, telling him about the latest events in town, about the new flower bed near the supermarket, about the Johnsons' granddaughter who got into college, about the local festival. Her voice trembled, but she kept talking, trying to drown out the eerie silence. Tom walked silently beside her, nodding occasionally, exactly as he did in life. A chill ran through her body whenever the ghostly figure passed too close, and shivers ran down her spine each time she noticed how the moonlight shone through the translucent figure of her former neighbor. George Wilson, whom they were heading to see, was a stout man of 73. Due to his bad knee, he walked with a cane and wore thick-rimmed glasses. Once cheerful and sociable, a lover of telling stories from the past and a collector of old vinyl records, he now rarely left his house, as if he too had become a shadow of his former self after that quarrel with Tom. When they approached George's house, Tom froze. His ghostly figure trembled as if from an invisible wind. He gazed at the familiar windows where light still burned, at the old porch swing where they once spent warm evenings talking. Finally, he retreated into the shadow of a huge maple tree whose branches hung over the garden. It seemed that even after death, shame and guilt prevented him from approaching his old friend's doorstep. Mrs. Peterson walked up to the door and knocked. When George opened it, leaning on his cane, she extended the envelope to him, simply saying, "This must be for you." George slowly took the envelope with trembling hands. He removed his glasses, wiped them, put them back on, a familiar gesture that betrayed his nervousness. He unfolded the letter and froze, recognizing his old friend's handwriting. "Hello, George. I don't want those hurtful words I said to you that day to remain the last between us. 50 years of friendship deserve more than that." George's eyes quickly scanned the lines, his face reflecting a storm of emotions: surprise, sadness, and finally forgiveness. Tears slowly rolled down his cheeks, falling onto the yellowed paper. A strange mixture of sadness and joy appeared on his emotional face. Of course, he forgave his friend, but his heart ached at the thought of that last lost year. How many Sunday chess matches they could have played. How many stories they could have shared. How many cups of coffee they could have enjoyed together at their favorite spot. After hugging Mrs. Peterson with gratitude, George suddenly froze. In the corner of the yard, under the spreading branches of the old maple tree, he noticed a familiar figure. His heart skipped a beat. There stood Tom, just as straight and lean as he remembered him. Moonlight shone through his translucent figure, creating a gentle glow around him. For a moment, their eyes met. Tom's eyes no longer held sorrow, only peace and warm gratitude. He slowly raised his thin hand in a farewell gesture, and on his face appeared that same gentle smile that George remembered from their Sunday chess matches. George wanted to say something, take a step forward, but the words caught in his throat. Tom had already begun to fade into the evening shadows. First, the contours of his figure became more transparent, then his smile dissolved into the air, and finally his eyes disappeared, in which the burden of guilt that had haunted him even after death had finally extinguished. The invisible presence of reconciliation and forgiveness lingered in the air for a long time, and a gentle breeze that passed through the garden seemed to whisper, "Goodbye, old friend." After that night, Mrs. Peterson often pondered what had happened. She still went on her evening walks, but now her view of the town had changed. In the rustling leaves of old maples, she heard unfinished conversations, and in the flickering of street lights, reflections of someone's untold stories. George began to leave his house more often. Sometimes they would have coffee together at the same cafe where the friends used to gather, and he would tell her stories about his chess battles with Tom. In such moments, Mrs. Peterson noticed how his eyes would warm up, and she understood. Some bonds cannot be broken even by death. Now, while collecting local news and gossip, she had learned to see something deeper behind them. Unfinished conversations, unspoken feelings, untold stories. And when neighbors would sometimes ask if she too had seen Tom's ghost that everyone was talking about, she would just smile mysteriously, unconsciously touching her pearl necklace. After all, some stories are better left in the shadows of the setting sun, where the line between reality and wonder becomes so thin that it's almost impossible to distinguish.